everybody. This is Caroline here, and this is the first time I've decided to do a series of videos on my blog. It's not the first video we've done, but anyway, I'm going to do a series of videos about DID, and the first video I'm going to do is about how I got my diagnosis and about diagnosis in general. So, I got my diagnosis of DID officially in 2010, but I was unofficially diagnosed in 2001. What happened was I was going to therapy for a while. I started in therapy at age 17, and I was going for a while. I was being treated for depression, I was being treated for anxiety, I was being treated for an eating disorder, and I went through a couple of therapists, and then I met one who spotted the DID, except for she didn't tell me right away. She told me that we needed to get me assessed by a doctor, and we needed to do some tests, and she came with me to that assessment. And DID is rare, as you know, and in Ireland it's not very widely diagnosed. So she came with me, and I saw a psychiatrist, a female doctor at the time, and she assessed me, and she asked me all the questions about voices, hallucinations. I thought she was going to diagnose me as schizophrenic because she was asking me about voices. She was asking me about my thoughts. She was asking me about if I hallucinate and am I psychotic and stuff like that. So anyway, I thought, yeah, definitely she's going to diagnose me with this. And I was very young. I mean, I was only like 21, but like I knew something was very wrong because like I'd been hearing voices for as long as I could remember. Things, were going missing and appearing in other places. Things were appearing that I hadn't bought. I was feeling like smaller and younger than my age. I was feeling, of course that was the depersonalization and derealization, but I just didn't know them as that. So yeah, it was very trying time, but she assessed me anyway, and I was diagnosed with DID. And then I just went back into therapy, and I didn't have formal tests, as I said, until 2010. So all these years until 2010, I had an unofficial diagnosis, but it was still written down and everything. It just wasn't, by DID specialists or somebody specialised in dissociation and trauma. But I was treated, I had medications, I had therapy. And then in 2010, I was seeing a therapist, and we needed to get some extra funding for therapy because I was seeing her for a long time. And normally, the organisation that was paying for my therapy, normally they don't pay for years and years of therapy. And by this stage, I'd been seeing the therapist for over 3.5 years. So both of us together, we decided that we'd go for a formal diagnosis, and the specialists came from the UK, and they did the dissociative experiences scale interview, which actually I did the dissociative experiences scale before they came over. I did it, and my therapist did it with me, and we sent it back over to them, and they scored it and they brought it along with them. When they came, they did the structured clinical interview for dissociative disorders. They did the somatoform SQD-20, which is for somatoform disorders. They did an assessment where I basically had to tell them about the inside world, about my insiders, about my lost time. They asked me questions about identity confusion. They asked me questions about dissociation, about, as I said, about my system, about our world inside, about the alters, about all different sorts of things. The assessment lasted 6.5 hours. And then they went back to England and they prepared a report. I also had a psychiatric assessment done as well as the dissociative disorders assessment. There was the guy who did the dissociative disorders assessment. He was a psychoanalyst, and a psychiatrist came over as well, and with him, and he did the psychiatric part of it. So my own psychiatrist at the time, who wasn't Dr. Barry, it was another doctor, came to part of that assessment as well. And the psychiatrist who was assessing me got to speak with her. Like her name was Dr. Collins. She was the doctor I had before Dr. Barry. And I had her for nearly 5 years. She was very understanding about the DID. She was very understanding and good with the alters, and I've been very, very lucky actually, because my doctors didn't change very frequently. When I first got my diagnosis, I had the same doctor for 5 years. Then I had Dr. Collins for 5 years, and now I have Dr. Barry. So and I've had Dr. Barry for 2 years so far. So yeah, that was my diagnosis. Basically, they compiled the report and I got a copy of it. So I do have a copy of my diagnostic report. My psychiatrist got a copy of it, my GP got a copy of it, and my therapist got a copy of it. So yeah, it was really, intense and very very long, and it was like 10 or 11 pages long. And basically the report, was compiled of my answers to the questions they asked me and their opinions. So yeah, it was pretty long, but it was really good to get a formal diagnosis, and I'm really glad I did. It's helped an awful lot, and it's really something that if you have DID, and if you can afford it, or if your insurance will pay or whatever, then I highly recommend a diagnostic assessment for your own peace of mind. And that's it. That was my diagnosis. Anybody has any suggestions for me for a video blog, comment to me and I will see what I can do. Okay, bye.